On the issue of killer spy drones, America is not like other countries. For one thing, we have them. I mean, other countries have some of them, but we have a lot of them. We have way more of them, and we're really, really good at making them. America's drone supremacy is unrivaled. We're number one. We're number one. And it will probably stay that way until we begin selling our drone technology to every Tom, Dick, and Hungry. But until then, we're on top. Yesterday, a U.S. drone reportedly killed more than 24 suspected militants in Yemen. Today in Pakistan, our great ally Pakistan, NBC reports that a U.S. drone reportedly shot 2 missiles into an inn. 4 militants hiding there on the second floor were reportedly killed. It was the second deadly U.S. drone strike in Pakistan in 2 days. Our Air Force says it wants to send more drones to its forces in the Pacific and South America once the war in Afghanistan wraps up. We don't want to let a good drone go to waste. The point is, America has more drones than anyone else, and we use more drones than anyone else. We also like drones more than anyone else. In this new global survey, a solid majority of people in more than 3/4 of the countries polled disapproved of the way America uses its drones. America's drone policy is not okay. That's the majority opinion almost everywhere. Almost everywhere except America. In the U.S., almost 2/3 of people think the opposite. They approve of the Obama administration's use of drones. So for the time being, drones, those flying, spying, killing machines, really are an American thing. An American thing we're all used to seeing in other countries, in war zones. We are not used to seeing them stateside here in America. Maybe we should be. A drone belonging to the U.S. Navy crashed on Monday. The crash occurred around noon. There were no injuries, which is sort of the point of unmanned aerial vehicles, which is what drones are. This particular unmanned aerial vehicle was a Global Hawk drone. It is a surveillance drone, so the kind that spies, not kills. It has an extremely sensitive camera on it that can see through all kinds of inclement weather and survey tens of thousands of square miles in a single day. It is huge. 44 feet long with a 116-foot wingspan, weighing in at over 25,000 pounds, thus the large crash site. Another thing about that large crash site, it wasn't in Iraq or Afghanistan or Somalia or Yemen or any of the places you think of drones flying. This Global Hawk drone was in Maryland. To be exact, a marsh in Maryland on Monday. The Global Hawk drone was in Maryland because that is where the Global Hawk drone lives, on an American base in Maryland. This is our new normal. We are now a country that has drones stationed all over the country. There are 64 American drone bases, 64. A nonprofit group that promotes public access to information put this map together showing where they are. Now, it's true that military drones cannot legally spy on Americans, but there are about 60 organizations, mostly police departments and government agencies, that have licenses to operate surveillance drones right here in the U.S. Drone proliferation isn't only disconcerting if the technology spreads to other countries. It's a little freaky if it spreads too quickly here, too. Or at least maybe it should be. What happens when domestic surveillance and spying go from expensive and time-consuming and requiring lots of people and being very difficult to cheap and quick and easy? A country that can use drones so easily might make a different calculation about what is worth doing because the costs of doing it are now so low. Join us now, Spencer Ackerman, who reports on national security for Wired.com's excellent Danger Room and has written much on this subject. Spencer, it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So you guys reported today that there are 64 drone sites in the U.S. What should we take from that? I mean, is it just where we store them? Is there implications to it? It sounds like a big number, but maybe it isn't.
That's right. These are places that have the drones, they're hangars, they're runways, they're places where you train remote pilots how to fly these things from air-conditioned boxes with lots of computer screens and IM windows and that sort of thing. The bigger concern for drones in the United States isn't just the military. It's in police shops that are increasingly getting FAA licenses to use these things in law enforcement contexts.
And so there is a law. The drones cannot spy here. And as you say, but they can be in law enforcement. So how is that distinction dealt with? What does it mean for a drone not to be able to spy, but to be able to do surveillance for a police department?
So here's an example. Basically, what we're talking about is something called incidental collection. usually. Imagine if there's a hostage situation in a building downtown and the police is called in and there are negotiators running around. There's a SWAT team trying to figure out areas of entry and egress. You can put a drone up in the air, the theory goes, in order to get a better 360-degree aerial view of a potential crisis situation. That was actually a scenario described to me by a sergeant in Miami-Dade's police department.
So that seems like something we would want to do. One of the questions I think that sort of arises, though, we have, my understanding is very much ramped up how many of these we have during the war on terror. It's been an exponential increase. What happens as we pull out of Afghanistan, as we leave Iraq, as we have all these sitting around with nothing to do? There's been talk about moving some of them to South America. What is going to happen to our sort of drone fleet?
Well, some of them are going to be, if you'll pardon the term, sniffing drugs. That is, they're going to be flying over.
Now, how smart are these, you said?
That's right. Well, they're not smart enough to make those sorts of decisions, which we don't endorse. But they'll be over some Navy fast boats that are going to be scouting out drug dealers, or some of them increasingly are going to go towards civilian use, towards law enforcement use. That's where the market for drones is going to go as the war in Afghanistan sort of winds down.
So we've been talking primarily here about spying drones, the kind of look and see drones. Obviously, a lot of them are killing drones, for lack of a better term. Rachel has written an enormous amount about drift in American military policy, how certain decisions we've made in the political system has made it easier to go to war and easier to stay in war because there's simply less of a cost to doing so. But there's this idea of technological drift, too, that it is now we don't have to send as many men. We don't have to, we can do this from here. It's easier. We have less risk involved. How does this change the cost-benefit calculation going forward about what kind of military and I think the term of art is kinetic excursions are worth doing?
It's a tremendous temptation. You don't all of a sudden have to amass the same kind of equipment. You don't have to do the politically difficult work of building support for a war. You don't even have to declare war. What you can do instead is basically move a very small unit with a few remotely piloted aircraft into a place like Yemen, into a place like Pakistan, into a place like Somalia, and have that substitute for really much more weighty considerations about the wisdom of a war, about the efficacy of a war. It's very rare that you hear the President of the United States really talking about what are very hot battlefields all over the world that really marginally declared would probably be a generous way of putting it.
And real quick, is it an issue in Congress at all? You don't hear the president talking about it, but is it at all a partisan or even at all a question in the relevant committees in Congress?
You really just get silence over it. If there's any discussion of the wisdom of using drones increasingly for remotely piloted war, you might say, it's in terms of enthusiasm. It's in terms of what these things can do. It's in terms of what greater battlefield situational awareness they can provide. Not really much in the way of criticism, very little in the way of questioning the wisdom of this sort of development.
Spencer Ackerman, senior reporter for Wired.com's Danger Room. It's always great to see you. Thank you for not droning on.
I'll try not.
You see how I did that? Coming up, election results, including the latest on the contest between a Mr. Creep and a Mr. Peed. Mr. Creep versus Mr. Peed. Soon enough, that will be Judge Creep or Judge Peed to you. Find out which next.